Rooftop. The music didn't stop when my phone hit the marble, but 3 people turned, and my wife still wasn't there. By the time I put on the watch she sent instead of showing up, I realized something was off. 3 days later, her best friend showed up at my door with proof that my entire life wasn't falling apart. It was being managed. 2110. Chicago, Illinois. Rooftop. Cold air moving above the river. The band was halfway through a Sinatra cover, clean and controlled. Too clean. I noticed the empty space to my right before the first chorus ended. It stayed empty. I checked my phone. Screen clean. No messages. No missed calls. The last text from Laura sat there from hours earlier. Neutral, routine. No delay implied. I put the phone back in my jacket and moved toward the bar. Black marble. Polished enough to reflect faces, lights, movement. I looked down and saw a version of the night that didn't include me. People leaned in, laughed on cue, held glasses like props. Everything felt arranged, me included. 2114. I scanned the crowd again. No sign of her. Not near the tables, not near the band, not near the exit. I tracked the pathways. Elevator doors, stairwell, service corridor behind the bar. None of them opened. 2118. I asked one of the coordinators. She checked a list, then another. Her expression stayed neutral, but her eyes stalled for half a second longer than necessary. That pause didn't match the answer. I moved on before she adjusted it. 2120. I took my phone out again and started dialing. The motion felt automatic, necessary. A hand cut across my line of sight. The phone hit the marble, then tile. The sound was sharp enough to slice through the music for a fraction of a second. Heads turned. Not many. Just enough. I picked it up immediately. No cracks. Still working. The person who hit it had already shifted position. Smiling. Engaged elsewhere. The angle didn't make sense for an accident. The timing didn't either. I wiped the screen with a napkin and slid it back into my pocket. The band didn't stop. The rhythm held. But something underneath it had shifted. 2127. I stopped trying to locate her directly. I watched instead. People moved in loops. Small clusters forming and dissolving. Hands on shoulders. Quick glances. Controlled proximity. I noticed how often someone stepped slightly between me and open space. Not blocking. Redirecting. 2134. I checked the elevators again. Still closed. No arrivals. No departures. I counted minutes without looking at my watch. 2140. Toasts began. The timing felt exact. Not delayed. Not adjusted. Laura was still missing. A colleague from work stepped forward. Short speech. Measured. Predictable. The kind designed to fill space without creating it. People laughed where expected. I nodded at the right moments. Nothing broke. Then the gift appeared. Not from her directly. Passed through someone else. Then another. It landed in my hands already opened halfway, as if my part had been reduced to completion. A gold watch. Heavy, old style. No branding visible on the face. The kind that suggested intention. I turned it once under the light. The reflection cut across the dial. I wore a fitness band every day. Light, functional, disposable. This wasn't that. 2144. I put it on. The metal was cold. The weight settled immediately. The clasp clicked shut with a finality that didn't invite adjustment. It fit tighter than expected. Not painful, just exact. I rotated my wrist slightly. The links didn't give. The face caught the overhead lamps and held them. Around me, the music resumed at full volume. Conversations picked back up without hesitation. The night continued as if nothing had been missing. I looked at the space beside me again. Still empty. 2148. I checked my phone one more time. No signal issues. No delayed notifications. Just silence. I stopped checking after that. Instead, I watched how the night moved without her. How no one mentioned her absence. How no one asked. That part didn't align. 2152. I traced the sequence backward. Invitation. Planning. Guest list. Timing. Everything had been precise. Too precise for an unplanned absence, which meant it was planned, just not by me. 2155. I rested my hand on the bar. The marble was warmer now. or my hand was colder. The watch pressed against my wrist. Constant. Present. Like a marker. I looked around again, slower this time. At faces, at timing, at positioning. Nothing obvious broke the pattern. That was the problem. If this wasn't a celebration, then it was something else. And whatever it was, it had already started before I arrived. 8-5. Lincoln Park apartment. Morning light cut through the blinds in straight lines. The suitcase stood by the door before I entered the room. Laura moved efficiently. No hesitation. No second passes. Everything already decided. I watched the sequence. Clothes folded tight. Toiletry bag zipped without checking. Phone face down on the counter. No notifications lighting it up. 8-9. She lifted the handle of the carry-on. The wheels didn't make much noise on the floor. Soft, controlled. The plan looked rehearsed. 8-12. The door closed behind her. The latch clicked once. Clean. The apartment went quiet immediately. Not peaceful. Just empty. I stood in the same spot for a few seconds, then moved to the kitchen. Her coffee cup was still warm. Half full. Left behind on purpose or by timing. I didn't touch it. 8:15. I checked my phone. Her last message sat at the top. Short. No punctuation at the end. No priviknaya detalizacija. No mention of location. No names. I read it twice. The structure felt reduced. Like something edited down. 8:22. I opened our previous messages. Scrolled back 3 days. Then a week. Patterns started to thin out. Fewer specifics. More general phrases. The shift didn't happen overnight. 8:40. I checked her social profiles. No updates. No stories. No tags from friends. No travel hints. Too clean. 9:10. I opened her contact list and found Megan. Closest friend. The one who always posted. Always visible. 9:30. I called. No answer. 9:32. I sent a message. Neutral. No urgency in tone. I waited. 9:47. Nothing. 10:15. I placed the phone face down and started moving through the apartment. Bedroom. Closet. Her side looked intact. Nothing missing beyond the suitcase. No sign of overpacking. No rushed decisions. Bathroom. 2 toothbrushes. Both in place. Kitchen. Groceries still stocked for the week. Meals she had planned stayed in the fridge, labeled. The setup didn't match a spontaneous trip. 11:30. I sat at the table and mapped the last 48 hours. Timeline. Events. Gaps. The rooftop. The absence. The gift. The watch was still on my wrist. Heavier in the morning. 13:05. I checked the flight schedules out of O'Hare. Multiple departures matching the time window. Too many options. No confirmation. 15:20. I called Megan again. No answer. 15:45. I checked her profile. Last activity from the previous night. No location tag. 16:10. I stopped calling. Instead, I waited. 18:02. The doorbell rang. Single press. No follow-up. I walked to the door without checking the camera. Megan stood outside. Hair wet. No makeup. Hoodie zipped halfway. Shoes not fully tied. She didn't look prepared to be anywhere. I unlocked the door and stepped aside. She moved past me immediately. No pause in the hallway. No scan of the room. She held her phone out before she even reached the kitchen. I took it. 18:05. The screen was already open. Message thread. Not the top of it. Midway. Dates lined up along the side. I recognized them without checking twice. Evenings when Laura had stayed late. Dinners that ran long. Meetings that couldn't be rescheduled. I scrolled up. More threads. Different contacts. Same tone. Phrases repeated. Slight variations. Structured. References to timing. To positioning. To reactions. 18:09. I scrolled down. There it was. A pattern in language. Not casual. Not random. Words like setup. Control. He doesn't ask. I kept moving. 18:14. I didn't ask anything. I didn't look at Megan. I stayed with the screen. Attachments appeared between messages. Screenshots of other conversations. Fragments. Pieces of something larger. I followed the timestamps. 18:18. A voice memo. I pressed play. Laughter came first. Light. Confident. No hesitation in it. Then structure. References to events. To timing. To outcomes. I stopped it halfway through and moved to the next. 1820. Another voice memo. Same tone. Same clarity. Nothing sounded improvised. 1823. I went back to the text. One line stood out because it didn't match the rest. Short. Isolated. The trip is the window 1827. I scrolled further, looking for context. There wasn't any. Just that line, sitting between longer messages. I checked the timestamp. It matched this morning. 8:1. 4 minutes before she left. I locked the phone screen and handed it back. The apartment felt smaller now. Not physically, structurally. Everything aligned too well. The rooftop, the absence, the watch, the timing of the trip, all connected. But one part stayed open. If the trip was the window, then something was scheduled inside it. And it hadn't started yet. 2240. Kitchen. Only the light above the table was on. Everything else stayed in shadow. I spread the pages out in straight lines. Printouts, screenshots, timestamps in the margins. Ink still slightly warm. The table filled quickly. Too quickly. 2248. I aligned the first set by date, then by time, then by overlap. Messages from different threads began to match without effort. Nothing needed interpretation. 2255. I placed the voice memo transcripts next to the corresponding days. Short fragments. Clean cuts. Enough to map tone without replaying them. I didn't play them again. 2310. I started building sequence. Work dinners. Late meetings. Unplanned delays. Each one had a counterpart on the page. A message sent minutes before. Another 1 minute after. Positioning. Adjustment. Confirmation. I marked each point with a pen. Small circles. No notes. 2322. The pattern didn't emerge slowly. It locked in all at once. There were no gaps. 2335. I checked the calendar on my phone, cross-referenced events, added them to the table. Everything aligned without friction. That part was clean. 2350. I paused and looked at the layout from a distance. It didn't look like random behavior. It looked like design. 05. I traced one thread from start to finish. A single evening. A single excuse. It had 3 stages. Setup, execution, closure. Each stage had timing. Each timing had a message. That's when the shift happened. She wasn't reacting to situations. She was constructing them. 012. I went back to the rooftop night. Placed it into the sequence. There was a message sent earlier that afternoon. Short, direct, referencing timing. I circled it. 018. I added the watch to the table, not physically, just as a point in the timeline. Gift delivered at 2140. No direct contact. No explanation. It fit too cleanly into the structure. 020. I picked up my phone and opened contacts. Scrolled down to a number I had saved a year ago. I hadn't used it. I pressed call. 023. The line connected on the second ring. I stayed with facts, dates, assets, exposure points. No narrative, no framing. 031. I walked through the structure I had built on the table. Kept it linear. Removed anything that wasn't verifiable. 045. The call ended. I placed the phone next to the documents and didn't touch it again. 052. I sat down and looked at the table one more time. Everything held. 110. I turned off the overhead light and left the pages where they were. The apartment stayed quiet. 6:30. Morning came without interruption. I returned to the kitchen. The layout was unchanged. No distortions. No missed details. I started separating the pages into 3 stacks. Accounts, property, communication. Each stack had its own order. 650. I opened my laptop and accessed the accounts, one by one. No overlap. I flagged the joint entries. Isolated personal deposits. Checked recurring transfers. 720. I listed what needed to be closed, what needed to be moved, what needed to be frozen in place. No estimates. Only confirmed numbers. 85. I printed the list. The printer noise filled the apartment for a few seconds, then stopped. 8:20. I got dressed. Same routine as any weekday. Same pace. The watch was still on my wrist. I hadn't taken it off. 8:55. Bank. I signed where needed. Initialed the rest. Requested restrictions on specific accounts. Set thresholds. No questions asked. The process was standard. 9:30. I confirmed transfers. Watched them process in real time. Numbers shifting from shared to separate. Clean. 10:15. I requested documentation. Hard copies. Time-stamped. They handed them over in a folder. Plain. Neutral. 11:15. Post office. I mailed a sealed envelope to a secured address. Tracking number printed at the bottom of the receipt. I folded it once and put it in my pocket. 11:40. Back in the car, I checked my phone. One new message from an unknown number. No text. Just a missed call. I didn't return it. 12:30. I reviewed the remaining items from the list. Crossed off what was done. Left the rest untouched. 13:00. Email confirmation came through. Process could be initiated within 24 hours. No delays expected. All prerequisites met. I read it once. Archived it. 13:10. I sat in the kitchen again. The table now half empty. Only key pages remained. The structure was still there. Everything aligned. Too well. 13:18. I went back to the first message in the thread. The earliest point I could find. The tone was already controlled. Already measured. No transition phase. No visible shift from normal to calculated, which meant it had started before that. 13:25. I looked at the timeline again, this time for absence instead of presence. Moments where nothing was recorded. Those gaps didn't look random either. 13:30. One question stayed. If the system was this precise, this layered, this controlled, why leave any part of it visible? Why allow a thread to exist that could be followed? I didn't find an answer on the table, which meant the answer wasn't there, and whatever was missing was still in motion. Day 4, 10:02. The door opened without hesitation. I was already at the table. Laura stepped inside with a carry-on that looked lighter than before. The wheels traced the same path as they had 3 days earlier. Controlled. Quiet. Her skin held color that didn't match the timeline. Not enough hours. Not the right tone. It sat on her like something applied, not earned. She moved through the hallway without scanning the room. No pause. No check. 10:05. She reached the kitchen and stopped. The papers were still on the table. Not stacked. Not hidden. Spread out in lines that forced sequence. Her eyes landed on them immediately. She didn't touch anything. 10:07. I didn't explain. I didn't stand up. I didn't move closer. I lifted my hand and pointed to a specific line. Mid-page. Timestamp visible. I watched her read it. 10:08. Her face shifted once. Subtle. A recalibration. 10:09. She moved to the next page without asking. Faster now. 10:10. The second shift came quicker. Less controlled. 10:11. The third one settled. Stable. Practiced. She placed her hand on the table. Not to steady herself. To mark position. 10:15. She started moving through the pages in a different way. Skimming instead of reading. Looking for context instead of content. Her posture adjusted. Shoulders back. Chin slightly higher. 10:18. A brief change in rhythm. A softer expression. A hint of dismissal in the way she turned one page over. It didn't hold. 10:22. She stepped back from the table and looked at me instead of the documents. Measuring reaction, not information. I didn't give her anything to measure. 10:25. She shifted again. Slower this time. More deliberate. The room stayed quiet. No external noise. Just paper edges brushing against each other as she moved them. 10:30. I took one page from the center and placed it in front of her. A transcript. Clean formatting. Time markers aligned with audio. I tapped once on a specific line. 10:31. She read it. The pause was exact. Not too long, not too short. Her eyes didn't move past the line immediately. They stayed there, fixed, calculating. 10:32. She didn't reach for another page. 10:33. The shift came again. This one didn't involve the papers. Her posture changed first, then her breathing, then the way she looked at the table, not at the content, but at what it represented. Distance replaced reaction. 10:35. She stopped engaging with the details entirely. Instead, she scanned the room, the apartment, the placement of objects, the layout I had left untouched. She was no longer processing evidence. She was assessing position. 10:37. I watched the transition complete. She wasn't trying to reframe the situation anymore. She was moving to something else. 10:40. I stated the next step. Timing. Filing. Process already in motion. I kept it flat. No emphasis. She didn't interrupt. That was the first clear break. 10:41. She looked at me again. Longer this time. No visible reaction to the words themselves, only to the implication behind them. 10:42. Her hand moved off the table, slowly, deliberately. She didn't touch the papers again. 10:44. The room felt different, not quieter, more defined. The structure that had been on the table was now between us, and it wasn't moving. 10:46. She adjusted her stance one more time. Not defensive, not open, calculated. That was when the realization settled in, not from what she said, not from what she did, from what she stopped doing. She wasn't trying to regain control of the narrative. She had already moved past it. 10:48. I looked back at the table. Every piece still in place. Every line accounted for. No gaps left to close. And yet something remained unresolved. Because her reaction didn't match the loss of control. It matched preparation. 10:50. She turned slightly toward the hallway, not leaving, just shifting angle. Her focus moved away from the documents entirely, as if they were no longer relevant. That didn't fit. If the system I uncovered was complete, then this moment should have ended it. But it didn't, which meant the system wasn't complete. 10:52. I stayed where I was and watched her. She didn't look back at the table. She didn't reach for her phone. She didn't ask for anything. She just stood there, already one step ahead of the moment. And that was the part that didn't align. If control was gone, then why did she look like she still had something left to use? 16:50. 6 hours later. My phone started vibrating before I picked it up. Not one message. A sequence. Names stacking on the screen. Colleagues. People I hadn't heard from in weeks. Numbers without names. I didn't open them immediately. 16:53. I placed the phone on the table and watched the notifications build. The pattern mattered more than the content at first. Clusters. Timing. Overlap. 16:57. I unlocked the screen. The messages were neutral on the surface. Short, casual, measured tone. Each one carried the same structure. A question without asking. A concern without detail. 17:2. I opened the next thread. Same rhythm. Different sender. No one referenced specifics. That was the first signal. 17:10. The version reached me in fragments. Not directly stated. Implied through repetition. I was unstable. Overreacting. Controlling. The words didn't appear in full sentences, just shaped around them. I read through 3 threads without responding. 17:18. I checked timestamps. The messages started within minutes of each other. Too close to be organic. 17:25. I moved to social feeds. No direct posts. No names mentioned. But the tone had shifted. Subtle language. Indirect phrasing. Enough to anchor a narrative without stating it. 17:40. I set the phone down again. The structure was familiar. Same pattern. Different medium. 18:00. The shift became visible. Not in messages. In absence. People who would normally reach out didn't. Invitations disappeared from the calendar. A meeting moved without explanation. A call postponed. No one said why. They didn't need to. 18:15. I mapped the changes. Who contacted me? Who didn't? Who altered behavior? The pattern held. 18:40. I went back to the table. The documents were still there. Ordered. Stable. The system I had mapped extended beyond the apartment. 19:10. I opened a new folder on my laptop. screenshots, message logs, contact names. Exact times. No interpretation. Just record. 1930. I worked through each thread methodically. Captured full conversations. Marked entry points. Noted repetition in phrasing. Certain words appeared too often. Too consistent across different people. That wasn't coincidence. 1950. I cross-referenced senders. Some had no direct connection to each other. But they shared one link. Her. 2010. I leaned back and looked at the screen. The narrative had already been distributed. Not loudly. Not publicly. Quiet placement. That required timing, which meant it had started before she walked into the apartment. 2030. I closed the folder and saved a backup, then another. No gaps. Day 5, 9 o'clock. I sat across from the attorney. Documents aligned between us. No discussion beyond sequence and execution. The process moved forward. 9:20. Signatures. Initials. Dates. Each page added weight to something already decided. No delays requested. 12:40. Notifications were sent. Structured. Formal. Distributed to the required parties. One of them carried more weight than the others. Her father. 15:15. The response came faster than expected. Not through the attorney. Direct. I read it once. No direct threats. No raised tone. Just positioning. Consequences implied through certainty. Influence outlined without specifics. It didn't need detail. 15:25. I archived it without replying. The message wasn't meant for negotiation. It was meant to establish pressure. 16 o'clock. I reviewed the folder again. Messages, patterns, timeline. Everything held, but one piece stood out. The financial references inside the threads. Short mentions. Casual placement. Too casual. 1640. I pulled those fragments into a separate file. Dates. Amounts. Accounts mentioned indirectly. Cross-checked with known data. The overlap wasn't exact, but it was close enough. 1730. I ran through the sequence again. The narrative campaign, the timing of the trip, the distribution of messages, all aligned. But the financial layer sat underneath it. Unaddressed. 18 o'clock. I made the decision, not based on the messages, based on what they pointed to. 1815. I compiled a separate package. Only verifiable data. Transaction logs. Cross-references. Supporting documentation. No commentary. 1840. I sent it to an external channel. A place that didn't process narratives. Only numbers. Submission confirmation came through within minutes. No feedback. Just receipt. 1910. I closed the laptop. The apartment was quiet again. 1930. I checked my phone. New messages. More of the same tone. Same structure. The narrative was still active. But I didn't engage. 2045. I reviewed the locks, the windows, the placement of everything inside the apartment. No changes. 2130. I sat at the table one last time. The documents were reduced now. Only core pages remained. Everything else had been moved, stored, or sent. 2210. I powered off my phone. The silence that followed was complete. No vibration, no light, no interruption. For the first time since it started, the system lost direct access. I left the phone on the table and turned off the light. The room went dark. The structure I had built held in place. But one question remained open. If her move was controlled through narrative, then what would happen when the focus shifted to something she couldn't shape? The answer came the next morning, and it didn't follow her pattern. Day 7, 8:30. I turned my phone back on at the kitchen table. The signal returned first. Then notifications. Fewer than expected. I didn't open anything yet. 8:34. An email sat at the top. Official domain. Subject line neutral. No emphasis. I opened it. Account reviews had been initiated. Multiple entries. Linked entities flagged for verification. Timeframes matched the data I had sent. I read the list once. Then again. The overlaps were precise, not approximate, not coincidental. 8:42. I checked the attached summary. Transaction paths. Movement between accounts. Repetition in routing. It wasn't noise. It was structure. 8:50. I placed the phone on the table and waited. No follow-up messages came in. 9:10. I refreshed the inbox. Nothing new. That part didn't align with the previous pattern. 10:05. I checked the message threads from the last 2 days. No new entries. No passive check-ins. No indirect phrasing. The narrative had stopped. 10:20. I opened social feeds. Same accounts. Same people. No movement. The tone had reset. 11 o'clock. The absence became clear. The pressure was gone. Not reduced. Removed. No gradual shift. No tapering. It had been cut off. 11:15. I reviewed the earlier messages again. Same words. Same structure. Same intent. But now they sat without continuation. Disconnected. 12 o'clock. I checked call logs. No missed calls. No unknown numbers. The silence held. 12:40. I went through the contact list. Names that had been active 2 days ago stayed inactive. No one reached out to correct anything. No one followed up. That part stood out. If the narrative had been strong enough to spread, it should have required maintenance. It didn't. 13:10. I closed the phone and left it on the counter. The apartment felt different. Not lighter. Just stable. 14:20. I checked one last time. No messages from her. No attempts through alternate numbers. No indirect contact through others. Nothing. That didn't match her earlier behavior, which meant something had changed on her side. But I didn't investigate. I didn't need to. 3 weeks later. The process completed without delay. Documents arrived by courier. Clean formatting. No annotations. No resistance recorded. Signatures matched. Dates aligned. No additional claims. No extended disputes. It ended the same way it had moved forward. Quiet. I reviewed the final pages once and filed them. No copies left on the table. Same day, 16:30. I packed what remained in the apartment. Clothes. Files. Minimal furniture. No overlap with anything tied to her. 18:10. I closed the last box. The space looked temporary again. I left the key on the counter. No note. Next morning, 7:20. The new house sat at the edge of the city. No shared walls. No noise from above or below. The rooms were empty except for what I brought. I placed things without adjusting them twice. Everything had a fixed position. 6 o'clock. The next day. I started running before sunrise. Same route. Same distance. No variation. The streets stayed quiet. 9 o'clock. Work resumed. No changes in output. No shifts in schedule. Only fewer interruptions. I reduced contacts to necessary ones. No overlap with the previous circle. Weeks passed without deviation. 1 month later, 10:15. An envelope arrived. No return address beyond a city name. I opened it at the table. Single sheet. Typed. No handwriting. The structure matched her. No framing. No emotion markers. No attempt to re-enter. Just one line positioned at the center of the page. A question. Why I hadn't stopped earlier. I read it once. Then folded the paper and placed it in a drawer. No response sent. No draft written. That part stayed closed. Evening. 18:40. I took the watch off for the first time since the rooftop. The metal left a faint mark on my wrist. Exact shape. Clean edges. I held it for a few seconds, then placed it back into its box. Didn't throw it away. Didn't store it out of reach. I set it on a shelf in the office. Visible. Unused. Not as a reminder of what she did, but of the moment the pattern became clear, and the point where I didn't adjust to it. 20:10. I turned off the lights and left the room. The house stayed quiet. No messages came in. No delayed consequences appeared. But one detail remained open. If everything had been calculated from the start, then the question in the letter wasn't random. It was placed. And that meant she still thought there was a version where I would have stopped.